In the many years that I match fished, I didn't fish 2 matches in one day very often, but it did happen a few times, and usually it was planned. I'd worked out that I had an early match and a later match and I could fish both. And to be honest with you, it was pretty hard work. By the end of the second match, I was usually totally and utterly worn out, could hardly see straight, and wishing that I hadn't bothered. However, there was one day when I fished 2 matches in one day that wasn't planned. And what happened was this. In 1983, I had my sort of usual holiday in late June, early July at Oxford, staying at Wolvercote and fishing the Thames for a fortnight. Fished one of the club matches, the North Oxford match that I'd won the year before. Didn't do very well this time. I had about £3 and won my section, but that's by the by. And the weather was pretty hot. It was around about 80 Fahrenheit, around about 26 centigrade. And I had some good fishing, pleasure fishing, catching roach on tears, roach on hemp. I found some chub now and again, but generally quite good fishing. And on the last day of my holiday, the Sunday, there was an open match on Medley, so I thought I'll get a ticket for that. But before the match, I was in 2 minds on what tactics might actually work. I wasn't sure that hemp and tears would work in match conditions. Would it be difficult to get the roach close in with all the disturbance on the bank? So I decided to take a load of maggots, bronze maggots. I did take some hemp and a few tears, and I thought I'll just fish a waggler and maggots over, feeding maggots and hemp, hopefully catch some roach and do all right. One of the people that I'd bumped into that week was a local lad, and he wanted a lift from the draw to where we were parked up, which was probably near the Perch pub at Medley. And so his trainers were in my car, which was going to cause me a little bit of a problem. And I drew not that far away above the Perch in what they call the Perch Bay. Blazing hot day. What could possibly go wrong? The angler at the next peg tackled up a feeder rod. I had a ledger rod, but not what you'd call a feeder rod. And when the whistle went, he chucked out a ground bait feeder. I had no ground bait with worm and caster. I had no casters, no worms. And within about 4 or 5 minutes, his tip went round and he got a bream. I meanwhile was feeding away with my waggler and feeling a little bit worried, catching the odd little tiny chub, I mean really tiny, minnow size, the odd little tiny bleak, no sign of any roach. 5 minutes later he got another bream. Oh dear, I've got this wrong. In the heat wave there's a bit of colour in the river for whatever reason, and the bream are feeding, and my tactics of going for roach is not going to cut it at all. 20 minutes later he's got a third bream, and by now I'm thinking this is just a complete and utter waste of time as far as I'm concerned. I've got the wrong bait, the wrong tactics. There's no way I can get this back. I knew that there was a club match at Wareham with a 3 o'clock draw that afternoon, and bear in mind it's now about 11:15. Match has started at 10, and I'm thinking all my stuff to go home is not that far away. All I need to do is pack up, drive back to home at Wareham as it was then, and turn up for the Wareham match. So that's what I did, but the fly in the ointment was the fact that I had the trainers belonging to this lad, local lad. So I had to go and retrieve those, give those back to him. He was all right about that. He said, yeah, I'll manage, I'll get a lift from someone else back to where I need to get back to. So I went back to my relatives, packed my suitcase and set off down the A34 to back to Wareham, which took about 2 hours. I got home, dumped off the suitcase and went to the draw. Got there just as the draw was happening at 3 o'clock. Feeling a little bit frazzled. I've only fished an hour, remember. I haven't fished a full match in the morning. Anyway, this match was on the Frome at Eastmoor, and back then there were a lot of eels in the river, lots and lots of eels. It's a roasting hot day, and I drew a peg with quite a bit of weed close in, going out about 4 or 5 yards. A fairly narrow bit. We were fishing just above Wareham on the tidal. And there were lots of pleasure boats on the river, rowing boats, little motor boats. And the match started, and these boats are ploughing backwards and forwards, and float fishing's a bit of a waste of time. And then I thought, hang on a minute. This morning I got absolutely hammered by someone fishing a feeder. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe I should forget float fishing. So I set up my old Roy Marlowe persuader rod, got out a maggot feeder, little block end feeder, feeder links, the old Drennan feeder links, put a size 18 hook on there, double maggot, and chucked it out about 4 yards beyond the weed, not fairly close in. And it wasn't long before that tip was just banging round with not very big eels about like this, one after another. And we were pretty much geared up for catching eels, or at least I was in those days. I'd have lots of hooks tied. But these eels were taking it so quickly that I ended up starting to tie hooks on the bank, and I'd have a spool of line jammed between my knees, throw in the feeder, start tying a hook, because they were swallowing it. You couldn't get hooks out at all. And as fast as I could tie a hook, have it ready, I'd have another eel on the end, wind it in, cut the line into the keep net, tie on this new hook I just tied, put that on, chuck it in again and repeat. And that lesson of the feeder might be the answer was definitely a good one, because at the end of the match I'd got 26 eels. What a wonderful day's fishing. They weren't very big, and they weighed just over 5 pounds, which won the match. So 2 matches, one I totally got wrong, and one through learning from my massive mistake in the morning, I got completely right. And my not very big winnings paid for my open ticket in the morning, and over the day I was sort of, I got my money back, I suppose. So all's well that ends well. A funny sort of day. Like I say, I did fish 2 matches in a day, 2 or 3 other times, and one day I might tell you about 1 or 2 of them. That's it for this one. Fairly short match fishing memory. Just shows that you can never, you're never too old to learn something new. I was quite young back then, but I certainly learned something that day. To be properly prepared for a Thames match, and that preparation of fishing for bream would come up trumps a few years later. But like I say, that's another story again. So that's it for now. Until next time, it's goodbye.